Rex Tillerson out.
I very much appreciate his commitment and his service, and I wish him well. He's a good man.
President Trump fires the Secretary of State and nominates his replacement. We have reaction. Election Day. We're in Pennsylvania as voters head to the polls in a race where the life issue could play a big role. Thousands hit the streets in Dublin to defend life as Ireland grapples with overturning a law. Happy anniversary! Pope Francis marks 5 years as pontiff. We look back at his leadership. On EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday, March 13th, 2018. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you to those of you joining us from around the world for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. A dramatic shakeup at the State Department. President Trump ousts Secretary of State Rex Tillerson by tweet, barely 4 hours after he returned from Africa. He's picked CIA Director Mike Pompeo to succeed him, and the move rattled high-ranking officials at the State Department who say they didn't see it coming. Correspondent Wyatt Goolsbee is there. He has reaction. Good evening, Wyatt.
Good evening, Lauren. It's not just Tillerson who's out of a job. One of his top aides, Steve Goldstein, has also been fired after publicly contradicting the White House about why Tillerson was let go. Tillerson, for his part, addressed the media this afternoon to thank his colleagues and the American public for the chance to serve his country.
I'll now return to private life as a private citizen, as a proud American, proud of the opportunity I've had to serve my country.
Rex Tillerson addressing the public for the first time since he was fired, telling his colleagues Deputy Secretary of State John Sullivan will take over all his duties starting at midnight.
So the safety and security of our State Department personnel, accountability, which means treating each other with honesty and integrity, and respect for one another.
Via Twitter, President Trump says Mike Pompeo, director of the CIA, will become our new Secretary of State. He will do a fantastic job. Thank you to Rex Tillerson for his service. This morning, President Trump elaborated on what's been seen as a rocky tenure for the outgoing Secretary of State.
We got along actually quite well, but we disagreed on things. When you look at the Iran deal, I think it's terrible. I guess it was okay. I wanted to either break it or do something, and he felt a little bit differently.
The White House says Tillerson was told he was out on Friday. Officials at the State Department dispute that, saying Chief of Staff John Kelly called Tillerson on Friday, saying the president might tweet about him on Tuesday, but gave no indication he would be let go. Before he was fired, Goldstein put out this statement, saying the secretary had every intention of remaining because of the tangible progress made on critical national security issues. He established and enjoyed relationships with his counterparts. Senator Ted Cruz says Tillerson's departure shouldn't be a surprise to anyone.
It has been clear for some time that the Secretary of State and the President had significant tensions. And so I don't think anyone was surprised to see a change of leadership at the State Department.
Democrats also agree change is necessary here at the State Department. Senator Richard Blumenthal says this is an example of wider problems within the Trump administration. President Trump has nominated Gina Haspel as the new director of the CIA. If confirmed by the Senate, Haspel would become the first woman to head the agency. Lauren?
Let's talk about North Korea and its role in all of this. The president is planning to meet with North Korea leader Kim Jong-un to talk about the possibility of giving up his nuclear weapons. Did the shakeup at the State Department, or could it delay that process?
Well, certainly the White House says it doesn't want Tillerson's departure to interrupt the diplomacy that's going on there. A senior official says the president wanted to make sure his new team was in place and ready in advance of those talks with North Korea and for various trade negotiations moving forward. So the president also said something interesting today, Lauren, when he was out on the South Lawn. He says, I'm at a point now where I'm really close to having the cabinet I want. Lauren?
Correspondent Wyatt Goolsbee reporting from the State Department. Thank you, Wyatt. Protests are marking President Trump's first visit to California. He departed Washington this morning for an overnight trip to view test models for his promised U.S.-Mexico border wall. The president is focused on furthering his immigration policies amid tension. White House correspondent Mark Irons reports. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Lauren. The president is in San Diego, California to view those wall prototypes. He's made it clear border security must be included in any law that seeks to help undocumented immigrants known as dreamers. But some of those dreamers have a message for the president.
I am here to stand up and tell the president that we don't need walls. We need bridges.
That's right.
That you are hurting our communities. You promised us a bill of love. You told us that you stand with the immigrant community.
That group of protesters gathered in San Diego where the president is viewing 8 border wall prototypes.
The problem is you have to have see-through. You have to know what's on the other side of the wall. And I mean, a preference is something like that. The problem is you don't know what's on the other side of the wall. And if you don't know what's on, I mean, you could be 2 feet away from a criminal cartel and you don't even know they're there.
The visit comes as the Trump administration is suing California to block state laws designed to protect undocumented immigrants. In a tweet today, the president said, quote, California's sanctuary policies put the safety and security of our entire nation at risk. California Governor Jerry Brown has said the Trump administration is full of liars. As the president viewed the wall prototypes out in California today, he said, if we don't have a wall system, we won't have a country. Lauren?
Mark, U.S. Catholic bishops do not support open borders, but at the same time, they've been strong advocates for dreamers. What are they asking for?
Well, a leading voice for immigrants within the Catholic Church is Archbishop Jose Gomez of Los Angeles. He has called for legislation that enables dreamers to become citizens, and he's told lawmakers to stop using this issue for their own political advantage. Lauren?
White House correspondent Mark Irons, thank you. Republicans on the House Intelligence Committee say there was no collusion between President Trump's campaign and Russia. One member blames the CIA.
I have spent a couple days out to the CIA actually reading the raw intelligence, actually reading what we were basing this on. And when we release that report, we're going to be able to show, you know what, the CIA just got it wrong.
Devin Nunes and other GOP members have ended their year-long investigation and will soon release their findings. Democrats on the committee are expected to release their own report, making a case for collusion. It's down to the wire in Pennsylvania. Residents are voting today in a special election that could preview the midterm elections later this year. President Trump won this Pennsylvania district by 20 points in 2016, but now polls indicate it may swing to the Democrats. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi is in Washington County, Pennsylvania, talking to voters. Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, Lauren. I'm outside a polling place here in an area south of Pittsburgh. We've canvassed the district, visiting small towns and rural areas, and spoke with a lot of voters. And the votes being cast in polling places like this rec center behind me could reverberate around the country.
Here in the rolling hills of western Pennsylvania, Republicans and Democrats are looking at the race in the 18th Congressional District as a preview of the midterm elections, when every single House seat is up for grabs. Republican Rick Saccone is a 60-year-old Air Force veteran turned state lawmaker and college instructor.
Are you going to win? Thank you all for coming out. Are you winning? Absolutely. We're going to win. Get out the vote.
Democrat Connor Lamb is a 33-year-old Marine vet who's casting himself as a moderate.
I think it says a lot about Democratic enthusiasm around here. People are really excited for this race, and I'm happy for them that their voice is going to be heard all around the world today.
Lamb, a Catholic, says he's personally opposed to abortion, but will support it as a lawmaker. Pro-life groups are supporting Saccone, who's backed pro-life legislation in the State House. Some voters tell me this is an important issue for them.
Number one would be abortion. I don't see how anybody, especially myself, a Christian, could support any candidate that believes in abortion. There's no way. It's murder to me.
Robert Meekus of Elizabeth, Pennsylvania, supports Lamb, who he says can bridge the partisan divide.
He's willing to, negotiate. He's willing to talk to the other side, and that's what's wrong with D.C. today. Nobody wants to talk to each other. It's either my way or no way, and I don't think that's the way government should work.
Polls close in Pennsylvania's 18th Congressional District tonight at 8. We expect the results shortly after, and then you can be sure Republicans and Democrats will dissect what this one race means for this fall's races. 435 House seats up for grabs. Lauren?
Jason, it sounds like one of the candidates could win by a whisker. What are the two camps saying publicly about their chances of winning?
Well, Republican Rick Saccone told a scrum of reporters as he left his polling place today that he's confident in victory. His challenger, the Democrat Conor Lamb, would not answer that question. He wouldn't predict who would come out on top. But a Lamb victory certainly will energize Democrats in their hopes for reclaiming the House majority this fall. A win for Republican Saccone will give President Trump indication that his agenda is supported by the people here in Pennsylvania.
You're just down the road from my parents. Make sure you stop in for a cup of coffee. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi, thank you. Florida prosecutor says the former student charged in last month's school shooting will face the death penalty. Nicholas Cruz is scheduled for a formal arraignment tomorrow. His attorneys have said he would plead guilty if the death penalty was not pursued in the massacre. 17 people were killed that day. The United Kingdom gives Russia until midnight tonight to explain how a nerve agent it created was used in England. That chemical is suspected to have poisoned a former Russian spy and his daughter. They remain in critical condition. Prime Minister Theresa May says it's highly likely Russia is behind it. At least 3 people are dead after a car bombing in Yemen. The blast targeted security forces backed by the United Arab Emirates. ISIS has claimed responsibility. Colombia needs international help as it struggles with a humanitarian catastrophe along its border with Venezuela. That's what UN officials are telling us. Venezuelans are being driven from their homes by hunger, as we have reported. Catholic groups are helping to feed thousands of people who are fleeing the socialist nation, but more aid is needed. Experts say 50,000 Venezuelans cross into Colombia every day. And thousands of pro-life advocates in Ireland took to the streets this weekend to protest abortion. The majority Catholic country will vote in May on whether to repeal the 8th Amendment, which bans abortion. It's a contentious debate in Ireland right now. One speaker said the large crowd shows that a rising of the people against the media and the political elites is possible. Pope Francis celebrates 5 years as the head of the Catholic Church, and he is getting a vote of confidence from his predecessor, as well as the faithful around the globe. Vatican correspondent Juliette Lindley will join us in studio in just a moment, but first, a look back at his leadership.
Fratelli e sorelle, buonasera.
With a simple good evening in St. Peter's Square, Pope Francis sets the tone for his papacy, with a sense of humility fitting for the first Jesuit pope in history. Reaching out to the suffering and forgotten has been one of the pillars of his pontificate, along with mercy and reform.
Because actually Francis has said, we know what the doctrine is, we know what the truth is, and we spent 30 years working that out, reformulating Christian tradition and doctrine in the light of Vatican Council. But now we have to take it on the road.
And Francis has done just that, in his backyard at the Vatican and beyond to those on the margins of society, including immigrants and prisoners.
In essence, the invitation of Francis to the Catholic Church was, you need to embody your relationship with Christ with other people. People have to see the mercy and compassion of God. That's what they first need to see. The rest comes after that.
A main priority for Jorge Bergoglio has been continuing the work of Benedict XVI in reforming the Vatican. Francis has created a council of cardinals to advise him on the overhaul, and he's launched a variety of financial reforms. Another big task for the Argentine, responding to the clergy sex abuse crisis. And on this milestone, Pope Francis is getting support from his predecessor. In a letter, Pope Benedict dismisses critics of Francis, who say the Holy Father has no theological depth and represents a rupture from his own papacy. Benedict points to what he calls an internal continuity between the two pontificates.
Vatican correspondent Juliette Lindley joins us for a change here in Washington, D.C. in studio. Welcome to Washington, Juliette.
Thank you, Lauren. So wonderful to be here.
Let's talk about Pope Francis and the first Jesuit to be Pope. What are the other firsts that we have seen from Francis?
So many firsts, Lauren. I mean, he was the first Latin American priest and the first non-European in 1,300 years. He was the first Pope to meet the Russian Patriarch Kirill in over 1,000 years and for you Americans. He was the first to address the U.S. Capitol, the first pope to do that.
I was here. I was there when he did that, and it was very impressive. Now, you live in Rome. You cover the Vatican. Tell me what his daily routine is like. Do you bump into him every day? Or
No, I don't bump into him, but he did choose, as you know, not to live in the beautiful papal apartments, and he chose to live in the residence of Santa Marta, where other clergy members live. And he has a very simple routine. As far as I understand, he wakes up around 4:30, very early riser. He prays. He prepares his homily at the Santa Marta chapel, where he says Mass every morning. And then if it's not a Wednesday, he will then meet perhaps visiting dignitaries. He will meet bishops who are there for ad limina. And if it is a Wednesday, he will go into St. Peter's Square or into the Aula Paolo VI, and he will meet pilgrims for the general audience. Then he takes a nap in the afternoon after lunch.
A little siesta. We all should have that.
He has more meetings. He prays the rosary. He prays Vespers. You know, he puts great importance on the rosary. And he goes to sleep around 10, I understand.
Francis, who once said that he thought this would be a very short papacy, is 81 and still going strong. Do you think he would ever resign?
How about that? I mean, in 2015, he did indicate that Pope Benedict had opened the door to the possibility of a resignation. Now, who knows with Pope Francis? As for his health, you know, we know that he has limited use of one lung. He suffers from sciatica, but otherwise, it's not really an issue. In this whole papacy, we haven't had any medical crisis. If anything, we talk more about Pope Benedict's health.
When I was involved in his visit, when he came here in 2015, he was just on a breakneck schedule. He must have had, I don't know, 7 stops in a day, and you just kept going and going and going. So what do you think the highlights will be coming up on that crazy agenda of his?
From now on.
From now on.
Well, we certainly have this very weekend coming up. He's visiting for the Padre Pio's death. He will be visiting Pietrelcina, and we will certainly be covering that for you in News Nightly. And then coming up we have, well, he's going to Geneva, we just heard, in June. And he'll be there for the 50th anniversary for the Universal Churches. And then in the summer, there's the World Meeting of Families in Ireland. And you know, it goes on and on. In September, he's going to the Baltic states. Right. And then he has the canonization of Paul VI, supposedly in October.
I'm just tired listening to all of this.
Right?
Okay, well, you're going to be here all week, and so we will see you back on set here this week, and we're just so happy to have you.
Thank you, Lauren. It's a pleasure to be here.
Good.
Thank
Juliette Lindley, Vatican correspondent in the house. Coming up, helping the Holy Land, how you can have an impact on Christians in the region this Lent. And Reality Bites. Hillary Clinton reflects on her loss in the presidential election. Hillary Clinton tells an audience in India the United States did not deserve Donald Trump. And his win is linked to his former reality TV show, The Apprentice.
If you watch reality TV, you know it means that the person who is the most outrageous, the person who says the politically incorrect things, the person who's insulting and attacking drives big ratings.
The former First Lady also says she won the areas that are optimistic and diverse, but the president's campaign was about looking backward. Critics are calling Clinton a sore loser. Gay rights groups in Oklahoma are campaigning against a proposed bill that legislation would protect religious-based adoption agencies from lawsuits. Bishops in the state support the proposal, but critics say it permits discrimination. And an event at the University of Cincinnati on faith and the LGBT community is dropping the word Catholicism from its title. Archbishop Dennis Schnurr says the event does not have diocesan approval. He notes one of the speakers has been ordered not to speak on the church's behalf. For more on this story, visit our partners at CatholicNewsAgency.com. This year's Good Friday collection will benefit people in the Holy Land. Pope Paul VI started this tradition to support the holy sites and Christians in the region. Last year, the church raised more than $7 million, and that money went to education support for local churches and the reconstruction of Christian towns in Iraq. Up next, a book by Pope Francis will soon be a little closer to home. And all the right words. A defender of the unborn describes how her pro-life message went over in Silicon Valley. Debating the pro-life position can be difficult with people who don't agree. But Stephanie Gray tackles these conversations head on. She made a big impact at a talk she gave at Google headquarters in Mountain View, California last summer.
A lot of times people say, I support a woman's right to choose. We have to finish our sentence. That's not grammatically correct. Choose what? It's hanging there. I support a woman's right to choose what color shoes to wear with her outfit? Sure. What kind of ice cream she thinks is the best? Sure. But I don't support a woman's right to choose to kill an innocent child, regardless of the child's age.
That Google Talk has been viewed on YouTube more than 130,000 times since it was uploaded. And Stephanie joins us now. She's president of Love Unleashes Life. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Lauren. It's great to be on.
What was it like talking to Silicon Valley executives, people who are not necessarily known for their conservative views?
You know, I would say it was surprisingly positive. And I say that because I speak at a lot of college campuses, and I was wondering, will I experience hostility there like I have on college campuses? But thankfully I didn't. There was great receptivity. The audience was very pensive, actually, and I felt that the message was well received.
Did you change hearts and minds?
I believe the truth always changes hearts and minds. So yes, I would say that for sure. And I was told that not only was the in-person audience present, but there were over 144 internal live stream Googlers watching at the various Google offices around the world that were privately tuning in to the program.
Let's hear about your story. You began this pro-life outreach at the age of 18.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even think I knew what I was doing with my life at 18. Tell us a little bit how that came about and where you are today.
Sure. You know, when I was 18 years old, I'm a Canadian, and so I went to a pro-life conference for college students that an American came and spoke at. His name is Scott Klusendorf, and at that talk he said, there are more people working full-time to kill babies than there are working full-time to save them. And it was like the Holy Spirit grabbed my heart in that moment, and I was challenged by God. Will you work full-time to save these children, to save my children?
And you've been doing that? You founded a company, and,
Yes.
and you worked it for 12 years. You're still with them?
I worked for the Canadian Centre for Bioethical Reform, indeed, for 12 years. And then since then, I've now started my new ministry, Love Unleashes Life. And I'm focusing very much on speaking by influencing the influencers. So trying to train and form future clergy, future lawyers, and future physicians in the logic of the pro-life message so that they can take what I've found to be useful and spread it to audiences they have direct contact with.
And you do that in the United States, but also in Canada. Let's give our audience a little taste of what the Canadian pro-life agenda, how it is faring.
It's difficult. It's very difficult. We have a prime minister right now who is extremely pro-abortion, and we have no law on abortion, which means it can happen through all 9 months of pregnancy for any reason, and it's paid for by our tax dollars because of the way our medical system works in Canada. Beyond that, euthanasia has just become legal in Canada. So the pro-life movement has a lot that we are battling, not only to be a voice for those who are at the end of their lives and vulnerable, not only to be a voice for preborn children, but to also fight for our rights to free speech, which is a whole other element the pro-life movement often faces in Canada.
One phrase or word that you would give to a young woman who is considering an abortion?
There is always hope where there is life, and that whatever difficulties we face, that when we do the right thing, even when it's hard, when we put others ahead of ourselves, that amazingly beautiful things unfold. It doesn't mean it's easy, but beautiful things will happen.
Absolutely beautiful. There's a reason why you've reached hundreds of thousands of people. Thank you so much for coming on the program.
Thank you.
Stephanie Gray will be speaking at the Catholic Information Center in Washington, D.C. tomorrow. You can learn more and watch the event streamed live at cicdc.org. Finally tonight, we are going to soon learn about Pope Francis in a bigger way, a future of faith. The Path of Change in Politics and Society will be released in English in August. The book is based on 12 talks the Holy Father had with a French sociologist. Francis discusses his views on everything from divorce to ecology. And that does it for us, for all of us here at EWTN News Nightly. To all of you around the world, thank you for watching. I'm Lauren Ashburn. Let's keep in touch online. Follow me at Lauren Ashburn on Twitter and Lauren Ashburn EWTN on Facebook. Good night and God bless you.